Thanks for coming and joining us today here with two wonderful ladies who have devoted much of their time. I don't even know how many years collectively you have now that have been going towards pro-life issues. And so that's what today is about. What does it look like to be pro-life for God's people outside of the voting booth? For years and years, rightly or wrongly, some of the church tend to focus in on being pro-life in the voting booth, which, praise God, that was a good thing. But now that we've had this little tiny decision you may or may not have heard of, came down here not so long ago, what does it look like for us as a church, not just Wildwood, but the church, Big C, in America, to be pro-life in there? So wanted to just pick your brains on it. But first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell us what you do, and then tell us, how did you get drawn in specifically into spending so much time on this particular issue? So Jamie, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, well, I'm Jamie Brown. I'm the executive director of a women's pregnancy center, and it is just my thrill and privilege to be so. I've started in the pro-life ministry, sort of kicking and dragging in by a friend, and became a volunteer crisis counselor, and absolutely loved it. Just loved being able to care for these women that came in just scared and confused, and just loved it. And then, of course, progressed, as I call it, got demoted and came on staff a long time ago. And so here I am.
Good deal. And you're married?
I'm married to wonderful, wonderful husband, Glenn, for 45 years, and have 2 grown sons, and most importantly, have 4 grandbabies.
That you spoil.
That I spoil, yes, it's my job, and I excel at it.
Fantastic. Their ages, real quick, what are they?
21, 20, 8, and 12.
Denise, how about you?
I'm Denise Harley. I'm senior counsel and director of the Center for Life at Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a long title saying that I'm a pro-life attorney. And I work at a faith-based group that worked to overturn Roe versus Wade. I never thought I would get to work on pro-life issues going to law school. Always had pro-life issues on my heart, even from a young age. I think knowing that I was raised in a Christian family and taught where sex is appropriate and what marriage means, I always cared so much for those who maybe didn't have that same environment and same teaching and what that led to in their life. And rather than judge them, which was probably my first instinct, I thought I should care about them and pray for them. So it's always been something that I've been part of, but I never thought going to law school that I'd actually get to do it full-time as a career. And through a very weird series of steps that's too long to explain, God just put me on the life team at Alliance Defending Freedom. And so I full-time work on protecting moms and babies from the harms of abortion.
Well, for both of you, thanks. You're married also, and you've got some youngins as well.
I am, yeah. Been married for 10 years to Jason, and we have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 8-month-old.
That's great.
She's busy.
Yeah.
She is. And I tell your husband this from time to time. I say, if he keeps that dream alive, he can get as big as me one day. And as the guy works out.
Goals.
I think, yeah, that's right. In incredible shape. Just make sure I want to be with him in a dark alley rather than him on the opposing side.
Yes, we feel very protected with our muscle man.
Now, for those of you watching and listening, these ladies they won't tell you this. But you guys are well known in your industry itself. So we have one of a center that gets recognized on a consistent basis on a national scale, we do, and you have lobbied in front of the Supreme Court, and you've argued cases. And so one of the advantages we have right now in this room is I just want to pick your brains for a little bit. These are things that you have thought about a lot. You are in it day in and day out. And so I just want to ask you a couple of questions about this subject. How can we be pro-life now outside of the voting booth? Denise, could you do this? And by the way, there is thunder. Thunder and lightning, you'll hear it, just ignore it. Give us, from the legal standpoint, the Reader's Digest version, how did we get here and to this moment now where we are? So you can go back as far as you want and fill us in, legally speaking, how we got here.
Sure. Well, Roe versus Wade was just a tragic decision in 1973 when the Supreme Court, a majority said that they were discovering a new right of privacy that they decided included the right to kill an unborn child. That turns most state laws on their heads because almost every single state completely protected life from abortion And that is how our nation has been ever since, back into the founding of our nation, the common law. It was well understood that abortion was, certainly not a right, but it was actually a criminal offense where anyone who performed an abortion was punished. So it was a shocking trauma to our nation that suddenly just disregarded the sanctity of life. It was not justified in the decision. They sort of said, well, it might be coming from the First or Fourth or Fifth or Ninth or 14th Amendment. It's sort of emanating from the idea of privacy that we know is in there. And immediately kicked off just a very deadly regime where the United States was one of only a handful of nations alongside North Korea and China that allowed abortion on demand essentially throughout pregnancy, and even mandated that elective abortion be available into the 6th month of pregnancy everywhere. There were many attempts to overturn Roe. One big decision came up in the 90s that everyone thought was an opportunity to correct it. And that case ended up just having 3 justices sort of have a controlling opinion that didn't justify Roe, no longer talked about a privacy right, but started talking about it's actually a liberty right or a bodily autonomy right. And came up with some sort of confusing legal tests where now whether you can have an abortion is based on whether baby is viable or not, can live outside the womb, and really just caused a lot of legal confusion, obviously social sort of desensitization, because when you're told something is a constitutional right over and over and over again, and people, in my generation have never lived in a world where abortion was, unthinkable or illegal, it has an effect. And the numbers of abortions went up and up and up and up. And, the statistics we've seen over the past couple of decades are horrible. More than 63 million babies killed through abortion since Roe was decided. But because the roots were so incorrect legally, and because there's no constitutional right and no basis for that, nothing in the text of the Constitution, nothing in our nation's history or traditions or structure of our laws ever supported that decision, it was vulnerable. And so when the court's composition became folks who were willing to be committed to the text and what the law actually says, and ignore some of the social pressures to, do what was maybe popular or thought to be progressive, we were able to finally just attack the decision head on, say Roe was egregiously wrong, it's completely incorrect, it's unjustifiable, and it has to be overturned. And thankfully, on June 24th, 2022, in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Supreme Court overturned Roe, and we are now in a whole new world where finally, once again, the people and their elected representatives can choose to fully protect life from the moment of conception, and that's what we're starting to see, and it's really exciting.
So there's some confusion out there for some. So in other words, Roe versus Wade made it a right for women to be able to choose this. In the Dobbs decision, though, it did not make abortion illegal. Is that correct?
Correct.
All it did was it took the place of decision making back into the hands of the states to be able to do this. Okay.
The people, either through Congress or through the states and their representatives, can decide what the policies are going to be. And so that means places like California and New York are still going to have elective abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy, probably with taxpayer funding and all sorts of incentives for people to come there and have abortions. But in other states, we're seeing that the people have long been waiting for this opportunity. They had trigger laws in place so that the moment Roe was overturned, all unborn children and their moms would be protected from abortion. And so now we know that's what the American people have wanted all along.
So Denise was so helpful for me months ago when I was getting ready to preach here, and she gave me a little bit of some really helpful history. One of the things that really struck me, she said that after this decision of Roe, going back into to 1973, that what began to pop up, 2 things in particular, she mentioned 4, but 2 things in particular that grabbed my attention were a group of people, ladies, as you would imagine in particular, just gathered together to pray and just to call upon God to move on behalf of the unborn and the women in there. And the second thing that I was struck with in there was that there were these clinics that began to pop up in which women could have alternatives. Where can I go to get some counsel? when I'm faced with an untimely pregnancy, where can I go to get some counsel and advice? And that would be in addition to maybe those that would be for the option of abortion. This is where you come into play.
It is.
In there. How have you seen, just on a very practical level, how have you seen places like a women's pregnancy center be beneficial to women when they have, again, an untimely pregnancy, a moment of real crisis for them?
In general?
Yeah.
Well, basically, we allow them the space and the resources to be able to explore what all three of their options are in a non-pressured environment. So we don't have a financial dog in the fight for this. So there's no pressure one way or the other. Obviously, we want them to choose life, but that would be different than going like to an abortion clinic where obviously their end game is their profit line. So it's a great environment for them to be able to process what they need to hear, to get a view of their baby in the womb through an ultrasound, to get good factual and biblical counseling about what each of their options could look like.
So, Denise, you've helped to put together some of the laws even for states. You've helped folks to write that. And then the one that we have here in Florida is what?
In Florida, we have a 15-week law, meaning that elective abortions are illegal after 15 weeks gestation. That is something that was impossible under Roe versus Wade. And so it's, from that perspective, that's a great thing. However, from the other perspective, what we know about a baby at 15 weeks, the baby has had a heartbeat for several weeks. All the organ systems are fully formed. That baby is hiccuping and sucking its thumb, and it tastes what its mom eats, and it responds to pain. So there are a lot of reasons why that is still far, far from where we would want to be, because the majority of abortions do happen before then. So a 15-week limit still probably allows about 95% of abortions that were happening while Roe was in effect. And so I'm hoping that we'll make progress in the right direction towards making abortion completely illegal and unthinkable here in Florida.
So since the Dobbs decision, for you, knowing that we've got that 15-week period now here where we are, so specifically at Women's Pregnancy Center, how have things changed, if at all? Have things changed really much in the way that women are now coming, asking questions? Are they bringing up the Dobbs decision? Or how has that affected the way you train people, et cetera?
Well, actually, the landscape has changed since Dobbs. We are, as Denise mentioned, we have the 15-week time frame that triggered the states around us into much stricter laws. So what we're seeing is an incredible increase of girls that are reaching out to us from other states looking for abortions. And so that's given us just incredible opportunities to do phone counseling and hopefully getting them connected back with a pro-life pregnancy center in their communities, which we do every day, all day long.
So it's not just people walking in anymore. You've got folks that are calling from, again,
Yes.
other states that have, are you saying other states have more restrictive laws than the 15 weeks?
Sure. So Alabama does not permit abortion at all. And Georgia has a 6-week heartbeat protection. So after 6 weeks gestation, babies can't be aborted. So that obviously is causing an influx of sort of demand, if you will, to Florida, which is unfortunately now sort of an abortion destination in the Southeast.
One other way that we see things changing is now people are more leaning towards going towards the abortion pill or the medical abortion. Even just a couple of years ago, that constituted maybe 20%, 30% of the total abortions performed. This year now we're over 50%.
Wow.
And so we'll see that probably increase over time, particularly as the different states are restricting abortion more. There are at least 72 websites, international websites, that women can go to and get medication like this through the mail. So now their nearest abortion clinic could be their mailbox. And unfortunately, that what we're seeing and what we're trying to counsel against is that often when this happens, These girls are not screened medically. They do not speak to anyone about their own personal situation. They're not screened for ectopic pregnancy, which could be life-threatening. I mean, there's a lot of nuances with this that they think they could just take a pill and it's just over. And reality is just very much different.
This brings up I'm sorry.
It's just not the case.
Yeah, it brings up an interesting point. I know for years I've heard the argument from those that are more pro-choice on the side would say, hey, those that are pro-life are really anti-women. They really are against women, not just against the right to choose, but they're so focused on baby that they're really anti-women. I've never gotten that impression from you two. Tell me how, from a legal perspective, and then from what you do, how are you pro-women?
Yeah. Well, Jamie's the hands and feet, and they are loving moms every day, so I can't wait to hear her side of it. But from the legal perspective, when these state laws are being passed or federal bills being introduced limiting abortion, often those are supported in the record with research and studies documenting the harms to women from abortion. So abortion is known to, besides the potential risk of death, to cause hemorrhaging, to cause sepsis infections, to cause uterine lacerations, causing women to have hysterectomies. The chemical abortion drugs actually have a 4 times the complication rate of surgical abortion, where women are at home in their bathrooms taking these deadly drugs that have no beneficial purpose, and they're not told what to expect, and they're ending up in the emergency room, where emergency room doctors don't know how far along they were, what happened. They're often saying that they were miscarrying and so forth, and it is very traumatic, not to mention very well-documented harms of PTSD, substance abuse, increases in anxiety, suicidal ideation, depression. These are things that are emotional and psychological damage that goes on for years and years and years, which is another place the pregnancy centers come in with post-abortive counseling and just loving these women no matter what choice they made. So the harms are real, and they matter in why these laws are important to make sure abortion is not happening.
How about the hands and feet side of it? How would you enter someone that says you're just pro-baby, not pro-woman?
Well, I think she articulated it beautifully. We do obviously put the emphasis on the woman. And so whatever choice she makes, we're going to support her. Obviously, we don't refer for abortions, but we're going to come alongside her, if she allows us to, for after-abortion care. I mean, we're going to, if she wants to seek a place for adoption, we will place her with an agency that we trust and know well, and know that she will be well cared for and counseled before she places her baby for adoption. Or if she wants to carry her baby, then of course we have resources all over the place to help her in any direction, and we follow along next to her to make sure that her situation stays stable. But no, the counseling all is about the moms and the dads. We have a good, strong male counseling program as well, because they're certainly part of the equation. And we want to be there for them. That's the whole point of the ministry, is to love on them and care for them.
So we're an adoptive family. We've got 6 boys that were adopted, and we were one of those medical mysteries. Doctors just didn't know. You work fine, not sure why you're not able to get pregnant. And it was about a 5-minute conversation for us to say, yeah, we want to adopt. I mean, we didn't care how children came into our home. We just wanted children in our home. But one of the turning points for us was, so twins were first, and then there was the third child. That third child, we got a chance to be in the hospital room with the birth mother just days after she gave birth. And so she placed little Davis into the arms of Judith. She then asked us, could she pray over us? So I grew up in the South, so I get up out of my seat, and say, sit down. She insists, no, you sit down. She knelt at mine and Judith's feet while she was, Judith was holding Davis, got the twins over here with me. I'm trying to wrangle. And she places her hands on her knees and just prays. Wow. And prays blessings over him. Half of it was in her native tongue, Amharic, over in Ethiopia, and then half of it was in English. And instant change for us. We, at that moment, went, oh my word. We became pro-woman in a way that we had not been before. We were pro-woman in theory before. Now we became pro-woman in a way. One of the things I love about your banquets every year we get to celebrate life over there, is that oftentimes you'll see an adoption story, but you also see a story of a woman who chose to give birth, and how now not just Women's Pregnancy Center, others have come around, and where that family is able to thrive now, whether it be a single mom, whether it be a mom who gets married. I love the fact that you're showing us how people are thriving. Untimely pregnancy, hey, there's support that's out there. We are going to come alongside you and help.
And it can be done well.
Yeah, I'm loving it. What's coming down the pike legally? Knowing that she had mentioned the pill, the morning after, I know is commonly referred to. Go ahead.
Well, it's the RU486. That's different than the morning after pill.
Okay.
Yeah. So the chemical abortion drugs are used up to 10 weeks in pregnancy.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is, so far we've seen a lot of media misinformation, unfortunately, since the overturning of Roe, sort of scaremongering about women supposedly not being able to get emergency treatment if they have pregnancy complications in some of the states that are completely protecting life. That's false, but unfortunately I think it is influencing a lot of sort of voters and the public into thinking that these laws aren't responsible, and it's just not true. Every single state in the nation permits the life of the mother to be prioritized in some sort of emergency situation where the pregnancy needs to be terminated to make sure that mom can be stabilized. So that's a big part of the battle, is sort of those communications and people willing to find out what's true and talk about that openly with their neighbors. Obviously increases in demand in a lot of places. And some of the states that are very pro-abortion trying to solicit women to come there to have their abortions. So I think a lot of it for me, I think, is the messaging to get the word out about the nearly 4,000 pregnancy care centers now around the nation.
Wow.
That provide free material, resources, emotional support, on and on and on, for the mom during pregnancy, after pregnancy. And they're there to say, yes, you can, rather than pitting the mom's interest against her baby, rather than saying, you can't do this and this is a threat to your life, saying, you can do this and we're here to help you in whatever way you need it. So that is what we need, is sort of a cultural shift in understanding how pro-life is beautiful, right? Life is a human right. We can be pro-woman, we can be pro-baby, we can be pro-family. And those states hopefully are going to thrive. The ones that are eliminating abortions are going to be the ones where there are healthier people, more love, more support. Yeah, life is messy, right? But we don't eliminate human beings because, they're inconvenient. And so I'm hoping that those states will start to shine lights, and then that will be kind of a contagious effect where other states that might be more in the middle, maybe Florida and others, will have the courage to move towards making sure abortion is unavailable there. And as you might have, if anyone who's paying attention to some of the elections and the ballot initiatives, the other side has a lot of money. The pro-abortion side has tons of money, including, unfortunately, $500 million in federal money every year, and that has been, I think, deceptive, and trying to confuse people about what Roe was, what Dobbs did, and so forth. So just kind of taking a little bit of time to make sure that you are informed about the laws, and then thinking about creative ways how we can support moms in need so that these laws will work. Right? I mean, if we're not there when we make abortion unavailable, if we're not there for the moms in need, then it's going to be a disaster. But this is the moment the church has been waiting for, so now is the time to step up and be there.
Which has been a consistent critique that I've heard all over, whether again it be in an article or some news story or some comedian or whatever it is, that the attack is always now. Okay, Christians, you got what you wanted. Now we're going to see how you guys can't support all this. So for the person who's listening, watching, and they're saying, maybe it's me. They're saying about maybe I need this, or they say, but I've got somebody that I know very well who is in this scenario right now, has chosen to give birth in there. What do you say? How can you, your organization, and the church, how can we come alongside now and practically help people who are choosing outside of adoption? So we know that's a great choice in there. But outside of that, how can we as a church support you at a women's pregnancy and just in general people with their families?
Well, now, that's a long answer.
Good.
But the Reader's Digest version, as you say, obviously we need the prayers. You know, our prayers foundational to our ministry. Prayers foundational to most pregnancy center ministries. Obviously, we need the resources. Without the resources, we can't advertise to get the girls, and we can't provide, our Belly Boutique to provide resources for them to bring the baby home successfully. But more than that, what we need from our churches is a commitment, a team from each church, a commitment saying, I will be a team leader of 5 people from Wildwood that will commit to coming alongside these moms as we need them. So, for instance, right now we have a mom that's couch surfing because she doesn't have a place to go. So to be able to pick up the phone and say, Jane Doe from Wildwood, this is our need, and then mobilize that team from Wildwood. Maybe that would be a once-a-day phone call. Maybe that would be once-a-month phone call. Maybe this would be a person from Wildwood that comes alongside one of our male counselors and says, let's just have lunch and let me check in on you and see how you're doing so you can process what you're hearing. How are you doing? Or maybe it's someone who wants to come counsel and make a commitment for a long period, because we train these counselors and then life happens and life gets busy, and then that training, that time invested, goes for naught. So it's that kind of on-call, long-term commitment, someone that we can call and say, okay, we have this person who's just accepted Christ, they're a baby believer, they're not been churched in all their lives, they need someone to walk them into the church. Who's going to do that from Wildwood? Who's going to be there to do that for us? And it's sounds a little daunting to make a long-term commitment for that, but these are boots on the ground kind of concerns. This is where the rubber hits the road, forgive all the puns. Right. But these are day-by-day, daily situations that we deal with that we want our churches to get involved with. We don't want to be our church for these men and women. We want to be able to partner with our churches. And it just, the demand has grown so, the number of clients that we see has grown so. In order for us to dive as deep as we want to dive with them, we have to have those resources outside of the center that can be on call and on to, as demanded.
One of the greatest joys in my life, and we talk about it often here at Wildwood, we make this analogy with a fair level of regularity. When somebody comes to faith, it is a spiritual birth. You mentioned that. They are a spiritual infant. And we all know from having infants into our home, the worst thing in the world that we could do as a parent is say, whew, so glad that birth has taken place, and now you just grow, kid. You just do what you need to do. In the church, we tend to do that with regularity. We just say, well, someone's come to faith now, so now you just grow, and the best to you. And one of the greatest joys that I have in ministry, I've seen it for years now, is watching somebody make that transfer from unbelief to belief. But then when they start growing and go from belief to maturity, when I get a chance to walk alongside of them, I'm not doing the work. Holy Spirit's doing the work. I'm just there pointing them to Jesus and helping them learn a little bit about how to study the Bible, a little bit about how to pray, a little bit about how to lean into the body of Christ. I'm just there with a massive support system with people. Great joy that takes place. And so what you're saying is we're here now. That's where we are right now as a country. The laws have been have honored God in what we got right now. Now we need the church to say, I'm here. I'm going to come alongside these individuals, these families, and I'm going to be someone that helps just to stand in the gap and pray and resource and et cetera. That's what you're saying, correct?
Absolutely.
Would you say the same thing?
Yeah, definitely.
And you're on the board. Over here.
I'm a very proud board member. I work with pregnancy centers around the nation, so I get to brag on Jamie's all the time.
Good. For each of you, just a couple more questions, but for each of you, what is your dream when you think about not just the legal aspect of it, do hit it, but when you think about my dream for America, the next 30 years, legally speaking, this would love to see But then this is what I would love to see just for our country, period, as it pertains to life issues. What do you think about?
That's an easy question.
It is an easy question in some ways. There's so much. I think a holistic belief in the sanctity of life and sort of returning that to the American culture. I mean, we were founded on this idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or and what rights can you have? What freedoms can you have if you don't have the right to life? So sort of that understanding that each one of us is here, enjoys our freedoms that we have only because we had a chance at life, and how every single person deserves that. So I think buying into that can lead to a nation where abortion does become unthinkable the way it was really until 1973. I mean, or the early 70s, that was the way we lived for decades and decades. So I do think that's possible. I think when you look around the world globally, we are such an extreme outlier in how extreme our abortion policies are. We need to get back in line with sort of an understanding of human rights. And I think along with that will come sort of support for these ministries and pregnancy centers, but also hopefully a more creative, better use of public funds. Maybe some programs or public-private partnerships that are actually supporting women in need and making sure that they have the resources so that they know they can welcome children into their homes and into the communities, and making sure we're spending our money in a way that really goes towards making life possible for those who are in difficult circumstances.
And easier.
And easier, yeah. So it's going to take, again, it's things that were completely off the table while Roe was in effect, but now we have a whole new way to approach policy, law, and just sort of our activities, and we can have a much higher expectation of what the fruit of all that is going to be.
Mm-hmm. I'm ready to run my head through a wall right now.
Let's go.
So, Janie, same question.
I just say amen. That's exactly what I was thinking.
So I don't know if it was you, was it the first person I heard it from? I know we were privileged here not too long ago to have the former vice president come in and to speak at one of the banquets. And I love this terminology where it's no longer just illegal, it's unthinkable.
Unthinkable.
That would have, that would be the average mindset that would have the person.
And there's one, and actually I said this at the banquet, there's a pro-life champion, Roland Warren, who's the president of CareNet, who often says that his dream is that we would think of a baby instead of something we're sacrificing, moving towards something we're sacrificing for. And I think that expresses it beautifully.
Yeah, those are great words. So let me summarize. Right now, where we are, nation's history, laws, pregnancy centers, which were very, very few in the original days, and now you've said there's 4,000 of them, which is so great. Prayer. God's people should not stop praying in there. Don't think that because the rights have been given back to the states that our job is done. So,
and let me interrupt you here for a moment. We've started a new program called Praying for Babies. And so what happens is in real time as our counselors are engaging with our clients, we send out text and their prayer text, and they're beautiful, and they're pray for this baby, for this mom who's considering abortion, whatever the current situation is. And since we've put that in place, we've seen an incredible increase in salvations and babies saved. So prayer works, and it's powerful. It's a powerful tool.
it's almost like the Bible says that.
I
Prayers
think
of a
it's in there
righteous
somewhere,
man are
David.
powerful and effective. And again, I hate to do this, but as a theologian, I got to say it. The beautiful part about that particular passage, the prayers of a righteous man are powerful and effective. It is not our righteousness, but the prayers of any believer because of the righteousness of Christ. The prayers of any believer, whether you feel like you know how to pray or not, are powerful and effective because of who we're praying to.
And I'll confess, I get those texts. I spend about 3 to 5 seconds praying for each one, and it still apparently works. So
It's a prayer.
Yes,
that's Jesus.
It does. It works.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we want to pray for sure in there, and I would love to give you some tips if you're watching or listening on how to set up a schedule on how you could pray for things. I know you would have that as well. Things like this text message would be a great idea, but then establishing regular rhythms that help folks. But then coming alongside now of not just a women's pregnancy center, but other places that are devoting their time to how do we help resource women that are choosing to give birth and to parent in there. That there's a huge need to help them with very practical needs
Yes.
that are in there. That it's not, you don't have to be an expert in the law to do this. You don't have to be an expert in working with women. You just have to love people. Is that what I'm hearing? That we want to come alongside and offer ourselves to do it. Can I direct folks to Women's Pregnancy
Of
Center
course.
here?
Of course.
To say we want to, I think we as a church are going to pray. We got one place, we're just going to pray that God will raise up churches here in Tallahassee to come alongside of you and help, not just Wildwood, but others that would say, we want to be those that are going to stand in the gap for it. I want to close with this. I want to ask you two. You are not at all unfamiliar with criticism. That is going to be a part of it. And I really believe this, that you are devoting your lives to something that is central to the heart of God. So everything about Jesus' life, spiritual life, physical, everything, he's going to raise us back to life. Death was not a part of the original design of God, etc. Since what you are doing is at the center of the heart of God, we would be naive and foolish to think that the evil one would not come with attack. How can we pray for you specifically, just as an individual and in your ministry, for you, if you were to say, man, I would love if people would just pray this. How can we do that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Supposedly that's the way you know you're over the target, right? Because you're getting shot at. And I certainly feel it in my work for a legal ministry. I could absolutely use prayer as a wife, a mother, an attorney to be able to balance those things and prioritize those things, to find the rest in the Lord, even in all of this busyness, but also for a divine wisdom, because the overturning of Roe changed everything in a great way, but the other side is now piling on even more. And these are unexpected things. She talked about the international websites that are just mailing these abortions essentially to women. And it's an infinite list of legal challenges, and we need a lot of creativity. And we frankly just need the Lord's wisdom to be able to stop this, because it could go very, very badly right now, and that's part of why it's so important for the church to be there in this moment, because this can go south really quickly if we don't do it right. Oh, yes. But I need a divine wisdom to be able to just sort of keep being faithful, but to know what in the world to do in all of these legal cases across the country, and all of these, congressional bills being introduced and schemes of the abortion industry. It's so much, and it's way too much for me. So that's what I need prayer for.
Absolutely.
Well, of course, I would like prayer of protection for me and my family. That goes without saying, but more so for my staff. I'm concerned about the level of hatred that's coming across through social media, through phone calls that we're getting. We were attacked this morning at one of our centers. So just prayer that they can just keep the good fight going. They're amazing men and women, and they're mature in their faith, but just that they have the stamina to continue to fight this fight, and that God would give me the wisdom as well as to where to lead and how to lead the ministry as I keep the truck out of the ditch. But yes, as we go forward with this, I think it's a very pivotal time in our nation's history, and particularly obviously in the pro-life arena. And to have that undergirding is just so important. But yeah, I do covet prayers. We feel them. We feel them definitely.
Well, we will commit to doing that. And just as a recap, folks, wisdom, pray for wisdom, and then pray for the ability to finish well. Paul, I've been poured out like a drink offering. We want to finish well for how many years we'll give you. To both of you, just thanks on behalf of the church, not just Wildwood, the church at large, not even just in Tallahassee. Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your creativity. Thanks for your stick-to-itiveness, your grit. And I just pray God will bless you personally and professionally, that He will pour out His blessings on you, and you'll keep doing what you do. So thanks for giving us time today.
Thank you,
And we'll follow this up with another one here in a little while, in which I'm going to give some very practical things for us. Appreciate you. Love you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Blessings.
David.